Peace to everybody. This story is about Jussie Smollett's case file is unsealed by judge. A group of media organizations, including the New York Times, asked the court to unseal the records regarding to the actor's case, citing a need for more transparency. And of course, the media is a bunch of liars because they do not tell the truth about nothing. So this is why there are a bunch of crybabies right now demanding that this court records be unsealed by the judge, thanks to the media, because you cannot trust them whatsoever. And of course, here in the picture is Jussie Smollett himself from Empire. A judge in Chicago on Thursday unsealed Jussie Smollett's court records after media organizations asked that documents related to the Empire actor's arrest be made accessible. So so now the court had no choice but to unseal the records, thanks to the media demanding it. And you can't, like I say, you cannot trust the media. They lie too much. They twist words around too much, and they're nothing but a bunch of crybabies. The decision to unseal the case could allow public access to documents from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office that could shed light on why the office suddenly dropped all charges against Mr. Smollett in March. So now there was a decision to unseal the case and figure out why was his charges dropped all of a sudden. Well, Eddie Johnson, the Chicago superintendent for the police officers, and Rahm Emanuel, they're a bunch of wimps. Saying, oh, well, Jussie Smollett faked his attack, this and that. Why would you fake anything? This is ridiculous. Mr. Smollett was accused of staging a racist and homophobic assault against himself after the charges were dropped. The court approved a request by Mr. Smollett's lawyer to seal the case. Several new organizations, including the New York Times, asked the judge to reverse that decision, citing a need for more transparency in why local prosecutors suddenly decided to withdraw charges. So Jussie Smollett was accused of staging a racist and homophobic assault against himself. Why would somebody fake something like that if you over here filing a police report on the day of your attack? That doesn't make any sense. And the Chicago Police Department, they're bad cops there. They do false police reports and everything else to make themselves move up the ranks better. Mr. Smollett's case captivated the American public earlier this year with one baffling twist after another. What started as mass outrage over a celebrity being targeted based on his race and sexual orientation turned into indignation at Mr. Smollett after the police concluded that he planned the attack himself in an effort to gain publicity. Mr. Smollett has maintained his innocence. So Jussie Smollett, there's no way he could have done this to himself. If you get attacked by somebody and you're filing police reports about the attack, why would anybody think, oh, you faked it yourself? Come on, really? And of course, now it's baffling twist after another. Really? I'll tell you, the Chicago Tribune is a bunch of liars. They do not tell the truth about nothing. You can't trust the mainstream media either. And of course, Mr. Smollett, is maintaining his innocence because, he would not be really lying about this at all. The records were shielded from the public eye based on an Illinois law that allows a defendant's court file to be sealed if charges against them were dropped or they were acquitted. The law is partly meant to ensure defendants are not rejected from potential job opportunities because of an arrest record. So whatever Jussie Smollett had on his record before, now they're using that against him, along with the alleged fake attack on himself, which is kind of ridiculous because, you just never know what's going to happen. And of course, faking your own attack? Really? Come on. In explaining his ruling, Judge Stephen G. Watkins of the Surrogate Court of Cook County wrote that Mr. Smollett's request for privacy was not a good enough reason to keep the record sealed, considering that Mr. Smollett willingly spoke about the situation in detail on national television and other venues. So the judge had wrote that Mr. Smollett's request for privacy was not good enough. To me, I think he has every right to be private. Jussie Smollett has every right to be private. Just because he's openly gay doesn't give anybody the right to start attacking him for no reason at all. I mean, really? Come on. Even though he was willingly spoke about the situation in detail on national television and other venues, but still, Jussie Smollett does have a right to his own privacy. It does not give anybody permission just to go barging into somebody's privacy when they ask for it. After the March 26th dismissal, he voluntarily stood in front of cameras from numerous news organizations in the courthouse lobby and spoke about the case. Judge Watkins wrote, "These are not the actions of a person seeking to maintain his privacy or simply be let alone." So now the judge is saying, oh, it's not privacy. Really, Judge? I think the judge needs to be removed out of the courtroom himself and get somebody better in there than to have these crooked judges being on the bench all day long, every day. It was after March 26th, the dismissal, that Jussie Smollett voluntarily stood in front of cameras. In a hearing last week, the lawyer representing media organizations, Natalie Spears, argued that the intention behind the Illinois law did not apply to Mr. Smollett's case because it was so widely covered in the mainstream media. And again, you cannot trust the mainstream media. Do not believe anything they say because they are a bunch of liars. They lie to your face every day. And Natalie Spears, I don't even know who she is. I never heard of her before. That she argued that the intentions behind the Illinois does not apply to him. Really? Come on. After the charges were dropped, Fox announced that the sixth season of Empire would be its last. Fox executives declined to say whether Mr. Smollett's case had anything to do with the decision. They said there were no plans for Mr. Smollett to come back, even as they negotiated an extension on his option, leaving the door open for a return later in the season. So now Jussie Smollett will not be returning to Empire for the sixth season, which will be the last of it. Because after the sixth season of Empire, they are no longer going to be around because of all this mess that Eddie Johnson and Rahm Emanuel accused Jussie Smollett of faking his own attack and everything else. A lawyer for Mr. Smollett, Brian Watson, argued at last week's court hearing that the media had plenty of access to Mr. Smollett's case and that unsealing it would violate Mr. Smollett's rights. Mr. Watson said the media's position that intense public attention to the case precluded concluded Mr. Smollett's right to privacy was self-fulfilling. The media had full control over whether it gave a defendant that attention speaking outside the courtroom on Thursday. Mr. Watson said that he was unsure whether he will appeal the judge's decision and that he had to speak with Mr. Smollett before making any next steps. Yeah, so the media had plenty of access to the case, and it was and of course Mr. Smollett had a right to privacy with self-fulfilling, so Jussie Smollett had a right to privacy. And of course what this judge did was violated his privacy. The media organizations violated his privacy, and of course the judge's decision, he had to speak on what for making any next steps that he needs to take care of. In his order, Judge Watkins wrote that Mr. Watson's argument had some appeal and that there was a certain irony in news organizations seeking access to sealed documents based on the fact that Mr. Smollett is different than a typical criminal defendant, while actively threatening him that way. But he wrote, Mr. Smollett also chose to bring publicly to his own case, and so should not be allowed the privacy of a sealed case file. So he brought it publicly to his own attention. And so there was not be allowed the privacy of a sealed case. So media organizations, they're full of garbage, really, and they just violated everything out of the book. Kathy McNeil Sting, the lawyer representing the state, said outside the courtroom on Thursday that the state's attorney's office planned to review its files and turn over documents that were previously sealed. The office said in a statement that it would release the documents by June 3rd. So right about between now until that time, there will be some documents turned over and that were previously sealed. And this is what Kathy McNeil Stein is saying. To see what else is there that they didn't want nobody to know. Was it because of DUI? Was it because of a drug use? Was it because of this or that? We don't know for sure. But what Eddie Johnson and Rahm Emanuel in Chicago had done was totally uncalled for, because they accused Mr. Smollett of staging his own attack. And like I said, you can't be staging your own attack if you're filing police reports. And of course the city of Chicago, they're trying to get $130,000 out of him, plus another $130,000, which he is not going to pay for them, because Mr. Smollett had volunteered to turn over $10,000 bail and do 2 days worth of community service. That was it. Kim Fox, the Cook County State's attorney, wrote in a column in the Chicago Tribune that she wanted records in Mr. Smollett's case to be made public. Miss Fox had recused herself from the Smollett case because she had contact with a member of Mr. Smollett's family before he was considered a suspect. A lawyer representing the state did not take a position on the issue in court. So Kim Fox did recuse herself because she had contact with one of Miss Jussie Smollett's family members, but we don't know which one it was. It could be anybody. It could be his brother, his mother, sister, anybody. It could be grandma, grandpa. We don't know for sure which one it was. Mr. Smollett, who is black and gay, reported to police in January that 2 men assaulted him while he was walking in downtown Chicago around 2 a.m. He told detectives that the men shouted racist and homophobic slurs at him. placed a rope around his neck and poured bleach on him. Mr. Smollett said the men used the phrase MAGA country, a reference to President Trump's campaign slogan. So this is what Mr. Smollett is saying, who is openly gay. And of course, he told the Chicago police that the two men had allegedly attacked him and shouted racist, homophobic slurs. And of course, you poured bleach on him, and and he said that the two men had used the phrase "MAGA country," which comes from Donald Trump's campaign slogan. Skepticism to Mr. Smollett's account grew after news broke that one of the two men being questioned in the case had appeared in Empire in a shocking twist. The police arrested Mr. Smollett in February and accused him of staging the attack. A grand jury indicted him on 16 felony counts of disorderly conduct. Yeah, so the police, they arrested him. The grand jury indicted him on 16 felony accounts of disorderly conduct, which I think is kind of ridiculous of what they have done to Jussie. Yeah, it just grew after the news broke that one of the two men being questioned had appeared in Empire, and it's just plain awful. Then in March, prosecutors dropped all 16 counts, saying that Mr. Smollett agreed to forfeit the $10,000 he paid for his release and was not a threat to public safety. Prosecutors clarified that their decision to drop the case did not exonerate Mr. Smollett. City leaders, including former Mayor Rahm Emanuel and the police superintendent, reacted angrily to the decision to drop the case, and the city sued Mr. Smollett for funds to cover the investigation of the reported hate crime. Yeah, so the former mayor of Chicago, that means he's no longer the mayor, Rahm Emanuel and the police superintendent were angry about the decision to drop the case. Well, if you are filing police reports, then all of a sudden, a month or two later, you get accused of allegedly staging your own attack. No, you don't get accused of that, because when you're filing police reports here, there, and everywhere, yeah, you gotta have multiple investigations to find out what really happened. And with Rahm Emanuel and the police superintendent, they didn't do that. They had all these investigators to investigate all these what happened to Mr. Smollett. And it's just plain awful what is going on. And of course they accused him of hate crime. They put that on him too. Come on, really? Leave your comments below. I am out.